Hello, everyone. My name is Stephanie Christello. I'm the Artistic Director for EXPO Chicago, and thank you all so much for joining today's conversation. I wanted to officially welcome everyone viewing from home to the official kickoff of the inaugural edition of Exhibition Weekend, presented by EXPO Chicago with Hook and presenting sponsor Northern Trust. Exhibition Weekend is a digital initiative that convenes Chicago-based contemporary art galleries and leading institutions featuring current exhibitions, curatorial projects, and artist programs. Mirroring the structure of Chicago's art world, the virtual structure of this weekend straddles the commercial, institutional, and alternative facets of artistic practice that are unique to our city and our partners. In this spirit of collaboration, there is no better way that we could think to kick off this weekend than with this program, featuring artists Nick Cave, Bob Faust, Quentin Williams of Heartland Alliance, and Gabriel Lyon of Illinois Humanities. Today's program is presented with marketplace partner Artsy and official media partner Ocula. It is my distinct pleasure to introduce Agnes Gund, who will be making introductory remarks to today's panel. In addition to launching the Art for Justice Fund in partnership with the Ford Foundation and Rockefeller Philanthropy Advisors to support criminal justice reform in the United States, Agnes Gund is a world-renowned philanthropist and collector of modern and contemporary art. She serves on the boards of the Cleveland Museum of Art, the Foundation for Art and Preservation and Embassies, and the Morgan Library and Museum. She is also the co-founder and chair of the Center for Curatorial Leadership, as well as an honorary trustee of the National Young Arts Foundation, Independent Curators International, a very close partner of EXPO Chicago, and the Museum of Contemporary Art, Cleveland. We are thrilled to be partnering with you, Agnes, and the entire Art for Justice team on this program and the collaboration that we are organizing with the print that EXPO Chicago has commissioned by artists Nick Cave and Bob Faust, centering today's conversation to benefit all of the work that you and the great organizations that are a part of today's program do on behalf of equality and freedom for all. So with that, I wanted to pass it over to you, Agnes, and thank you so much again.
Thank you, Stephanie, and good afternoon. As a fellow Midwesterner and art lover, I'm grateful to EXPO Chicago for inviting me to be part of today's program about freedom. It's a profound subject, especially now, given the current state of the world. A few years ago, I sold one of my favorite paintings, Roy Lichtenstein's masterpiece, and contributed the proceeds to launch the Art for Justice Fund. The aim of the fund is to fuel policy change and creative work to disrupt mass incarceration and promote safe and healthy communities. Thanks to people like lawyer Brian Stevenson, writer Michelle Alexander, and filmmaker Ava DuVernay, I learned that America's justice system is badly broken, that it preys on people of color and the poor, that Black children are 5 times as likely to be incarcerated as white children. Since 2017, the fund has invested nearly $75 million in organizations and individuals that are transforming the justice system, such as Illinois Humanities and Heartland Alliance. I'm looking forward to hearing from Gabriel Lyon and Quentin Williams, 2 extraordinary local partners. Art for Justice grantees help keep people out of jails and prisons via justice reinvestment, shifting government funds away from locked facilities to aid neighborhoods hardest hit by poverty, violence, and over-policing. They reform excessive sentences and incarceration laws. They help returning citizens to build stability, and this is very important. The fund also supports artists to tell stories about parents, spouses, and friends, and children who are caught behind bars, and to show the human impact of mass incarceration. It goes without saying that 2020 has been a difficult year. I feel I also feel encouraged about opportunities to confront racism and build a more equitable America. One thing that sustained me is being part of the Art for Justice Fund family and Helena Wayne, joining with advocates, artists, and aligned donors. Our approach uses proceeds from art sales and other contributions to secure a future of safety, shared safety for all. And then I'd like to thank Nick Cave. I really, really like him and Bob Faust for donating part of the proceeds from their stunning print to benefit the fund's work. I've been a fan of Nick's fabric, sculpture, and performance art for more than 10 years. And I especially love his Soundsuits, their extraordinary scale, color, and vibrancy, and the wonderful program that he did at the Grand Central Station, where some of you may have seen it. It was just extraordinary. They were all dressed as horses, and they came on in such a, that I had my children go see it later because it was one of the best things that has happened there. I'd like to close with a quote from the esteemed Justice Ruth Bader Ginsburg. She said, "Real change, enduring change happens one step at a time. Together, let's keep fighting for freedom. The capacity to heal individuals, families, communities, and our democracy is ignited by our collective actions." Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Agnes. And to sort of kick off with this idea of collective action, it is now time that I'm going to introduce all of the panelists, and we will move into the conversation, which is going to be very cross-disciplinary and a real treat, I think, for everyone involved. So Nick Cave and Bob Faust are artists that almost need no introduction, but we've had the distinct pleasure of working with them and collaborating so closely through EXPO Chicago over the last 9 years that the fair has been in existence. And this print that Nick and Bob both collaborated on was actually created for the 2019 edition of EXPO Chicago. The 2020 version would have been taking place today with vernissage. So almost a year later, we're really happy to be working with you on reviving this program, and all of the ideas that are in the print are so much so much more relevant today. And it's really the work that you do has been something that has really withstood the test of time and continues to be critical and engaging for everyone involved. So Nick Cave and Bob Faust are both co-founders of Facility. A project that we also collaborated on with them was Amends, which is their most recent public project. And I'm sure that many of the things that we discussed today will lead into both Amends, Facility, and all of the work that you're doing on behalf of the foundation and as artists. Gabriel Lyon is the Executive Director of Illinois Humanities. Lyon's work is focused on leveraging the power of the humanities to make Illinois a more livable state for all residents. Her work includes the founding project of Project Exploration, which is a nationally recognized nonprofit organization dedicated to changing the face of science for youth and girls of color, as well as organizing cross-sector stakeholders, both locally and nationally. And Gabe, we're really excited to be having you on today as well. And Quentin Williams of Heartland Alliance is a campaign manager for Fully Free, the campaign to end permanent punishments. Williams' research includes the sociology of race and ethnicity, social inequality, and crime and punishment. He also works with the RROCI, which is Restoring Rights and Opportunities Coalition in Illinois, working with and for people with records, advocating for the expansion of opportunities for people with records and broader criminal justice reform in Illinois proper. So Gabriel Lyon and Quentin Williams, we're so thrilled to have you on this program as well as grantee organizations of Art for Justice. And I think I speak for all of us at Expo Chicago that we so value your work. And you know, what we know was sort of only the surface before we started partnering with you. So we're really excited to make sure that all of the attendees at home can also learn more about your projects and through the idea of Nick Cave and Bob Faust's print. So I wanted to pass it first to Nick and Bob to give a little bit of a sense of what this print is that we're talking about for those who maybe haven't seen it. It was published by Landfall Press, which was the original printer for the first Chicago International Art Exposition, which was in the 1980s, the first art fair in North and South America. So your print really taps into this legacy, but does so much more than that. So I'm wondering if you could start with some of the ideas behind the imagery in the print and what that meant for you.
Yeah, sure. Thanks for having us a part of this discussion. We're glad to be here.
Yeah, I think when Tony first approached us to bring the iconic print series back to the fair, it was immediately clear to us that we needed to start with the studio's most iconic works, Soundsuits, period.
Mm.
But where that was going to go, we weren't quite sure. We just knew that was the starting point.
Yeah, and to think about, you know, post Rodney King, which was almost 3 decades ago, that we're, you know, here in this situation as we sort of see ourselves today. So it was important to really sort of look at the body of work and to think about the work in terms of the iconic work and what did that mean in terms of bringing it to this 2-dimensional sort of format. And so it was really looking through that and looking at the work and realizing that it was really about sort of how do we sort of talk about hiding gender, race, class, and looking at something without judgment. Really was the sort of catalyst and the starting point. And so that's how we came to this particular image of the body and then shroud with this extraordinary head dress. And really sort of looking at that and talking about, you know, that I see you.
Yeah, I think for the poster, we chose a detail image that can have many readings. You know, it's focused on this adorned head with the headpiece, which is actually constructed from a burial wreath. But the image becomes even more complicated by the reveal of the naked torso. That lets us enter like the real complicated chemistries of strength and beauty, as well as vulnerability all at the same time. It was also really important then when we went back to find the original image that this was going to be built from, that would translate really well from 3 dimensions to 2 dimensions. We knew it couldn't be a simple like reproduction of a sound suit. You'll never understand the feeling or the gravity or the weight of a sculptural work of Nick's in, you know, just a simple photographic format. That's just it reminds you of what the real thing is. So we needed to make an artwork on its own, born from that body of Nick's work, but also reflected of the his materiality in its own way.
And the way that you both are talking about this idea of translation from performance in the body to an image, I think is, you know, a process that is mirrored in these types of mission-driven organizations and work that we all have to do, you know, starting from the very real and the concrete to, you know, distilling down that information and what is it that we can connect to, what is it that we can read.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So I wanted to sort of move on to Quentin Williams and Gabriel Lyon to give a little bit of a sense of what their missions are from their respective organizations. And Quentin, maybe a good place to start is sort of, how the work that you do with Heartland Alliance and the campaign Fully Free to end permanent punishments, which is a term that you really coined, how some of the ideas in these works have related to the work that you've been doing with Heartland.
Thank you for that question. And I just want to quickly say thank you to Agnes and also just the generosity of the Art for Justice Fund, because our mission is made possible by that generosity. So thank you. And also thank you to the other panelists. But the work as it relates to some things that Nick and Bob were discussing, and as they were talking, I kept thinking about humanity and the essence of being human. And Heartland Alliance is a over 100-year-old human rights organization, and we try to highlight those human rights and fight for those human rights in a number of ways. My work falls within the realm of the criminal legal system, where individuals are chained, if you will, in a number of ways. The way that I describe the work that I do is quite simply, we're trying to dismantle the prison after the prison. So when you talk about humanity and then the essence of humanity and the various aspects of it and the dimensions of it and the complexity of it, that calls my attention to one of our core foundational ideas and principles about the campaign, is that is essentially what we want to do. We want to pass legislation. We want to make sure that laws are off the books, but we also want to call attention to the humanity that has been taken away and stripped away from individuals who have been entangled in the criminal legal system and continue to be entangled by it. So I think when we think about humanity and we think about whose bodies are wrapped up in the grips of the justice system, it makes me think about the importance of this work. And really the essence of being fully free is to be fully recognized as a human. There's other things that come along with that, but one thing that Nick said that I think will stick with me is said, I see you. And when individuals are dehumanized by any system, but in particular this system, the criminal legal system, I think that it is in effect saying to us on paper, saying to us in a number of ways in daily life that we don't see you.
Great. And Eve, I was wondering if you could speak a little bit about your work with Illinois Humanities with that as well.
Sure. I mean, and it really is a privilege to be in community with all of you, and under the very generous umbrella of Art for Justice, whose name says it all. Illinois Humanities is we've been around for not as long as the extraordinary Heartland Alliance, but more than 40 years. And at the heart of our work is what it means to ensure access to the humanities. And so the way we do that is through free programs that bring people together. We make grants, most often to organizations with small budgets, where the mission is really driving what it means to make art, build community. But I think most close to our heart and soul is this idea of enabling conversation and community to strengthen civic engagement. So what does that have to do with envisioning justice? It's exactly what Quentin just said. So much about the ways in which the carceral system has made, by design, invisibility central to its approach. We really enable the arts and the humanities to make visible what is invisible. So Envisioning Justice, which is, we've been a recipient from Art for Justice for our Envisioning Justice initiative, is really about doing everything we can to leverage the power of the arts and the humanities to really shift the conversation, and at the heart of it, again, like make visible what it means to take away freedom, what that feels like, help people experience what the possibilities are. And I think, you know, one of the things I really love about the way, Bob, you and Nick speak and kind of unpack a single two-dimensional piece of paper, you know, that layers, that nuance, that's the level of conversation that we need to have if we're really going to be able to imagine freedom, because the injustice has been so normalized. The oppression and dehumanization has been so normalized, it's almost impossible to imagine, to have the language for alternatives. And so I think what's really great about you unpacking your print is you're helping those of us have language to name what we see, to think about how to connect. You know, when you talked about the being genderless, you know, or not having an immediate assumption imposed, that's what freedom is. So, you know, I think to me, this conversation is really about it's not enough to ensure access, to just say it's there. You really have to kind of have a collective experience towards freedom, and that requires imagination, and imagination's hard work, and that's why we need artists, and that's why we need humanists. That's what helps us get beyond what we know.
I think so much of it is about like art just being a way in to crack that door open, so we can talk about things that are hard or scary, or that we're afraid we're gonna, you know, we talking about art as looking like dumb because we don't know what art's about, but we can also talk about being scared to talk about a subject in exactly the same way. It's, you know, that's what Amends was intended to do. You know, we used the public space outside a facility at a public school on the front lawn to create a clothesline where anybody in Chicago could come whenever they wanted over the course of the summer, reflect upon their own roles within racism, their own contributions to that, and acknowledge them in themselves and then air them to the world, which is really cool for the person who's writing it, because there's a acknowledgement within that individual. But more importantly, what was interesting to us was that younger people seeing a community clotheslines of this apologies and magnitude could then have the power to go home to the dinner table and say, hey, there's all these people in our neighborhood or in our city that are saying this. And they probably didn't have that strength prior to knowing there's others out there willing to stand with them. So it is all about that public acknowledgement that allows stuff to shift, I think.
Yeah, and I think, you know, with both of your works, invisibility is not an option. You know, when you look at a Nick Cave and Bob Faust collaboration or any of Nick's performances, it's so, the visibility is so pronounced. But there is also, you know, a sort of masking that happens too. I'm thinking about with the Soundsuits, or even with this print, that what you see is not necessarily the face of the individual or the body of the individual, but an essence that is more free, more expressive, potentially unattached to the confines of the body. I'm just thinking of what Quentin said, referring to the body as the prison after the prison, you know, after incarceration and you know, being reintroduced into a society that you're still within the prison of a body. I'm wondering if Nick and Bob, you can talk a little bit about what freedom of the body actually means to you, whether it's through race, gender, class, and how that this idea of masking in order to be more free, sort of what you think about that.
Well, you know, I was just thinking about the print, and I was just thinking about when you look at that print, you know, there's a darkness that is very present in the print. There's a sort of sense of oppression in the print, but then there's color that is finding its way through that speaks about anew. And so for me, when I think about freedom, I think about having the ability, and for me, I have this sort of extraordinary privilege to be able to use my platform to talk about and to reflect on what is currently going on in the world. And so to me, that is what freedom is to being able to use this sort of platform for me to share, for me to collaborate, for me to inform, for me to open up a dialogue that continuously needs to be ongoing. I mean, I think about post-Rodney King, that's almost 3 decades ago. And we are still talking about the same thing today. And so, freedom is about creating space, creating projects that allow us to live in this world of hope and optimism, but yet talk about these very destructive and complex, unjust systems.
Mm-hmm. Quentin, I'm wondering if you could speak a little bit more about the prison after the prison with it was such a beautiful line, but also one that I think has a lot of resonance in terms of how we can, define a body either abstractly or in very real ways of moving through the world, and the work that Heartland Alliance is doing with Fully Free.
Yeah, man, so many things were coming up for me as you all were talking. I think you said something, Stephanie. You said, I think invisibility is not an option, like with the piece. And I think when we're talking about the prison after the prison, right? There is a bit of a common narrative about the way that crime or accusations of crime are handled, right? And that is that you do something and the good guys come get you, and then you go and serve a sentence that is justly adjudicated, and then you'll be rehabilitated once you're on the inside, and then once you're rehabilitated by the state, and then they send you home to live your life. But it doesn't go like that. Typically, what it goes, and what I mean by the prison after the prison, and why that invisibility line spoke so much to me, is that there is a level of freedom, right? People who find themselves in jails and or prisons are confined quite literally. There's a material structure, bars, guards, so on and so forth. But then you're released, and it appears to be a level of freedom, but then there's all of these invisible chains that people find themselves in that are very subtle sometimes and hard to see. And one of the goals of the project is to highlight that, which is why we changed the language from collateral consequences to permanent punishments, because collateral consequences sound very technical, and it sounds like very accidental. It sounds after the fact-ish. But the reality is, when you say permanent punishments, that is something that resonates with people, because that's exactly what they experience. They experience this punishment culture indefinitely. And what makes it even more egregious is that we know, because of the disparities, that this impacts Black folks in particular, right? And we are dealing with, as Nick pointed out, he mentioned Rodney King, so that's the front end of the system, right? The first contact with the state, but then you have what's happening on the inside. And what our project is about is that the extension of the extension of that into communities, the extension of that into people's homes by way of electronic monitoring sometimes. And then I'll in the answer to this question by using myself as an example. I spent a lot of my teens and 20s under some type of correctional control, meaning supervision, probation, parole, jail, prison. I experienced all of that in my life. And I remember the last stint wherein I was in the belly of the beast, if you will. I returned home and didn't even know the invisible shackles that I had on me until I went to fill out a rental application, until I went to fill out an employment application, until I tried to apply for life insurance, until I had to, go and meet with the counselor and talk about whether this profession is a good fit for me because I can't get the license. So all of these things that I had no clue of, and now I'm being exposed to all of these chains that I thought were gone once I walked out of the halls of the prison, but were still there. And then in fact, it creates this very vicious cycle. The fact that we are in prison in our own communities by way of being locked out of opportunity, then creates the conditions by which people return to that very material structure, and the cycle goes on and on. And that is why, until we get rid of that's after our efforts to abolish the prison will be, in vain. So.
And I want to touch on some of the very real ways that the campaign Fully Free is rewriting some of these policies and rewriting some of these guidelines. But first, Gabe, I was wondering if you could talk a bit about Envisioning Justice, because I think also that specific initiative touches on a lot of what Quentin was also just saying.
Well, first of all, Quentin, thank you for sharing that and reminding us of not only your humanity, but the reality of how these things intersect, because Envisioning Justice is actually what we're experiencing right now, honestly. Number one, simply by having the beautiful excuse of Bob and Nick's work to come together, we are convening a community. Now, I don't know how many people are tuning in right now, but my guess is some might be artists, some may have had firsthand experience or loved ones who were arrested or brutalized by police, or who in fact hold some of the chains in their hands that keep people from being able to get an apartment or being able to apply for a job. And Envisioning Justice, at the heart of it, is using arts and the humanities as a way to bring people together to imagine alternatives. And part of what Envisioning Justice has done over the last 3 years has been to work very closely in Chicago, initially with 7 community hubs, extraordinary organizations who do the work of unshackling within and without through writing, with young people, through hosting art as a way for therapy, through something like Let Us Breathe, the Let Us Breathe Collective, who create space for shared experiences. But Envisioning Justice, first and foremost, was about creating a network and a way for people to come together to use arts and humanities. We made grants, and best of all, I think we were able to, under the extraordinary leadership of Jane Beachy, our artistic director, and Tyrese Williams, who's a project manager, program manager, we created an exhibition at SAIC, 12,000 square feet, curated by an incredible curator who is from Austin, and to create a space like we're having right now. And thousands of people went through that. Flash forward, we're now extending the partnership. Whoa, that's not me. The deep partnerships here in Chicago across the state, because you know where prisons are? Far away, hard to get to, not connected by public transportation. You know what happens when someone like my godson is arrested and moves from county to prison? Hard to get to, hard to call, expensive. So that's part of it, right? So Envisioning Justice is literally about exactly this kind of experience, and infusing dollars into organizations and artists to make work and share work. But, you know, I would say Art for Justice is also, you know, I don't know if you're gonna be able to see this if I put it up. Can you guys see this picture? Is that
Yeah.
cool? All right, so this is an incredible piece of artwork. It's a memorial over at 93rd and Commercial. There's a studio over there called, I think, 93 Studio. This is their little, I took these pictures this morning. Envisioning Justice is about public access. Again, we're all here today. Thank you, Expo Chicago. If people are in the audience who are landlords, who oversee insurance, who can commission artwork, who can take the artwork in their homes and bring it outside, that's part of what we're hoping Envisioning Justice can do, is help people feel more connected. Because really the artistic practice, of which we have, you know, extraordinary artists with us, that artistic practice opens up the possibility. Freedom will not be possible without imagination. Imagination beyond what the familiar is that we know is almost impossible to get beyond. It's really, really hard to imagine beyond what we know. So alternatives to what we know, experiences of what we know, and most of all, I think, the moral imagination to understand what's right and what our part is to play.
Yeah. And, you know, Gabe, you're bringing up a point too, which is, you know, when we originally planned this conversation for this date, I don't think any of us, well, I know that none of us knew the context that we would be having this conversation in this week, with no justice for Breonna Taylor, with everything that's going on. You know, this was something that was planned far in advance, and it's a context that has to be contended with, and that can be contended with, I think, through the types of work and that we're discussing. But for Nick and Bob also, you know, there is a very large project that was supposed to happen this year, which is about letting go and freedom, that I think would actually be really helpful to talk about right now in the context of amends and what Quentin and Gabe have brought up, which are all of these ideas and how they made it into that very large, public, very populated piece that can't be taking place right now, but that has and was going to.
Yeah, you know, I was just sort of thinking about, you know, this is a question that as Quentin and Gabriel were discussing, you know, what came to mind is, you know, the record. How do we get past the record? That's the shackle for those that are incarcerated. What do we do with that in order for people to come closer to freedom? Because the record is what is sort of the sort of barrier. So the let go, I can't even talk about the let go when I think about like that. You know, it's sort of contrary to just these sort of thoughts that I have around the system and how do we change that in order for there to be opportunities for those to come to the let go and to be free and to move their bodies in this sort of way of release.
I think we can talk about the let go a little bit in terms of the election coming up, right? And so we are all in this, it's very clear we now are all in our bubbles and we're hearing what we want to hear, and we're more divided than we've ever been before. And one of the key concepts of the let go was to create a town hall without words, with the intent that if we get rid of words, we can get people in the same space without all the preconceptions, right, of getting to know one another. And through movement and body, we can still express ourselves exactly the way we want to without the hindrances of hearing and knowing exactly what I don't like about you, or what I don't like about what you believe in.
Or
And
being
so
hurt.
we did look at it as much of a place to release and be able to feel a bit of freedom from the oppression, but also as a way to come together to hopefully make a few new connections that allow us to talk across some borders that we're building.
So more of like an intuitive humanity.
Kind of.
Quentin, what are some of the real ways that that Heartland Alliance is putting forward the end to permanent punishments? Like, what are some of the key things that you all are working on right now?
Well, we're working on a number of things. We're working on, number one, centering the voices of those individuals who are directly impacted by the system. Because I oftentimes say this, that individuals with records, often communities that are on the outskirts of mainstream society, are often the objects of policy and programs rather than the architects. So one of the things that we wanted to do with this campaign is to ensure that we had the right architects at the table to help us build something until something emerges. So that's what we've been doing. We've been building that groundswell of individuals who have been left out and locked out. We've been, really building that base of individuals, number one. Number two, we've been working on our communications and narrative change, because there's a lot of things that we need to reframe. We need to reframe what it means to be a person with a record in the first place. Nick talked about the record, right? That negative credential in a credential society, right? We have these credentials that get us access to places, but this happens to be a credential that bars you from places. So we are really trying to, and those barriers that exist underneath those rests an assumption about people with records as threats, as dangerous, as people who are different than the general public, different than quote normal humans. So the other thing that we're trying to do and have been doing is really developing these messages to counter the harmful messages that we have seen the reemergence of actually since COVID. Because with all the decarceration efforts and individuals being, not allowed to come home based on offenses and things of that nature. So we've been working on that. And we've also been thinking about what our strategy will be legislatively, because the truth of the matter is in Illinois, there's 1,189 laws in the areas of employment, housing, and education that bar people from access to things that will contribute to their thriving and flourishing. So we are currently right now developing that strategy, building a broader coalition of organizations and like-minded individuals and allies, and even unlikely allies, because we do need this to be a collective effort. So we are getting our ducks in a row on that. So that's what we've been doing. The very real way that we can really make an impact is, I often say, policies actually speak. What's on paper says something. And I know Nick and Bob can attest that things on paper say things to us, right? And what we're trying to do is sort of when a person sees on paper, when you see on paper the policies that say, no, you, the kind of person that we have categorized you as, you're not allowed here. That says something to you, and it says something, it speaks very loudly to a lot of individuals of color in this country. So we're trying to erase them, literally erase them, so that that record can no longer speak to individuals negatively. So that's what we're doing, and I'm hoping and very grateful for collaboration with artists to really bring some of these ideas about freedom to life. The notion of being fully free. What does that even mean? The implication is that individuals are not fully free. There's like a little glimpse of freedom, a toe in the water, if you will. But we want to go swimming in the full ocean of freedom. So that is what we've been doing for this first year. And then in the subsequent years, we are going to only amplify those things that I just mentioned.
Yeah. And this idea of institutional records has, such a polarizing definition, like a complete opposite of the spectrum when we're talking about, for example, the museum institution, to have your work within a collection within that record, versus this other form of institution where the record is something that will essentially destroy everything about culture. So
Nick, help me make sense of that. Oh, sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off, Stephanie.
No.
Well, I just, this conversation is reminding me of something. Chicago and Illinois has a long history of both systemic racism and efforts for abolition. And I'm just thinking in this moment of, we talk about the record, how much being able to see through someone else's eyes and understand there's an experience other than our own is important. When Ida B. Wells was writing about the pervasiveness of American terrorism in the form of lynching. She was a data collector, she was a writer, right? She was a self-publisher, she was really a wordsmith. And Jane Addams, another Chicago hero, right, and international landmark for us, she wrote, "Hey, all you people doing lynching, violence is not the answer." And Ida B. Wells' response was, those people didn't do anything wrong in the first place. So I'm oversimplifying a very complicated narrative, but to this idea of what does the record tell us often depends on the eyes we're seeing it through. And part of shifting the narrative and why the paintbrush and the photograph may be more powerful than, as Quentin says, the pen on paper, is because it does let us see a little bit differently and maybe decenter our own experiences, at least for a little while.
Absolutely. And with the exception of this print, there's not much two-dimensional work that you both often do. It's very not, it's ephemeral in nature. I'm thinking of all of the performances that we've collaborated on with the Soundsuits and things like this. It's an experience that sticks with you, but it's not permanent in the same way that that perhaps this print is.
That's super interesting, the idea of permanence and how fragile paper is, though, too. It's like, of all the materials that we work with, that is probably the one that is the most fragile. And so I think every one of the things that you work on or that we work on, the goal is always to create a memory in the moment, and that travels with you no matter what, whether that object is in front of you or left behind, or that piece of paper is just something you saw and recorded. But it's about memory.
And it's that sort of memento. It's this sort of object that really sort of holds a moment in time. Again, it's another record. It's, we can look at this print and think about the time that it was done, for when it was done, for who it was done for. And so it's interesting to sort of think about it and its role and why it was created. And during time of, Brianna's sort of, what am I trying to say?
Well, it's memorialization, or it's acknowledgement, or it's like marking.
Well, it's the marking of this moment again. So I think that, it's, so for us, that's what it really allows us to sort of look back at, may it be a publication, may it be a print, may it be invitation. These are markers that sort of establish a particular moment.
And its connection back to Art for Justice this year. Like, that's so cool that this was made first to bring back like an iconic symbol of Chicago and art making and gathering. And here we are at one of the hardest moments of my life in the world. And this print is being used in an entirely new and additional way that is about this moment, right? So I think we have to be very thankful for you guys, Expo, for pulling that together. But then this conversation,
Yeah.
I'm just very grateful. Well, I printed that, okay? That's really awesome.
I feel like the print did that and so much more. You know, I can speak from Chicago's side. Of course, we were renewing this tradition of posters that were made in the 1980s. You know, again, when the Chicago Fair was the only fair in North and South America. So it had this huge global stature in terms of access and reach, and Chicago was on the map as this global hub, which it still is. But of course, the art fairs and everything is so much more now. But when you look at the prints that were the iconic images that the Chicago Fair produced, you'll notice a very clear lack of diversity also, right? So us working with you both to make this was not just to have a print, but almost to revisit that history and say it exists. We acknowledge the history of the Chicago Fair, who it was run by then. That captured a moment in how the art world was structured. We want to revise how that is structured, but not ignore that that's also the history of how this print is taking place, and that's the tradition that it taps into. I feel like that's why the print, you know, even a year later now, it's so recent, and the work is so recent. And so, of course, within the realm of both of your practices, it's going to talk to these other issues as they come up. We're having this conversation now. We'll see how I imagine that we could have the conversation again in 6 months. You know, unfortunately, it's one of those images that I think will really, that speaks to our current moment.
It's maybe also a good reminder that in this current moment, art is being made of and by this moment that maybe wouldn't have ended up, say, at or in Expo Chicago, but are on boarded up, street fronts that are being created by artists who are bringing maybe their name and talent to places they wouldn't have been, and vice versa, artists that maybe we wouldn't have seen have a platform and an opportunity in public space to do, I think, exactly the kinds of things we're talking about matter, making the invisible visible, memorializing places that matter, and reminding us, that freedom isn't just maybe when you walk out, that freedom is an act that requires a collective effort on many people's parts for each of us as individuals to contribute to and to be free. And I think that's one of the extraordinary things about the timing of this conversation, but also the meaning of what it means to make art for justice and where that art is and who it's for.
So everyone that's viewing from home right now can, they're seeing this image. It's on the homepage of the program.exposition.Chicago.com streaming that we're doing right now. So I think to have this conversation while looking at that image is also a really important thing for us, and to be able to see what you both have put together for this, and the conversation of surrounding it, I think is just as deeply layered as the process that you both went through in creating the image. So I'm really thankful that we're able to have a more expanded conversation, because it's really not just a print. It is this memorialization of this moment right now, and to have these conversations surrounding, I think, are incredibly important and something that we should continue doing. So I just wanted to sort of open it up for closing remarks from any of you, and thank you again for joining and being so committed to this cause and this image and partnering with us.
I just want to say thank you to Expo Chicago. I mean, and this great opportunity, thanks to Nick and Bob and Gabriel and Envisioning Justice folks in Illinois Humanities. I'm just really grateful to be part of this conversation in this moment, in this time, to be able to have a conversation and imagine what it is to be fully free. And even amidst
the audience that is from Expo Chicago's group, some of the contemporary art folks that may not have known about Heartland Alliance before, like, what are some of the ways that everybody can get involved with the work that you're doing?
Absolutely. So you can definitely reach out to me at qwilliams@heartlandalliance.org. You can also direct to me, man. Or you can go and look up our Never Fully Free report, which really outlines the scale and scope of permanent punishments in Illinois. And I think it also has inside of the report some very practical, tangible things that individuals can do besides connecting with me directly. But I really would love to connect with people. I love to connect with groups and organizations and individuals because, again, this is going to be a collective effort. And love what Gabriel just said, freedom. There's a connectivity that has to go along with freedom. Freedom does not happen in isolation. So please check out our report, connect with me, and yeah, let's.
And I think I speak for everyone at Expo when I say this is going to be just the first of many programs that we'll be collaborating on together. And Gabe, I know that a lot of our audience has seen the Envisioning Justice exhibition or may have seen it when it was on view at the Sullivan Galleries at SAIC. So that's, an obvious entree, but what are some of the ways that people can get involved with Illinois Humanities as well for Envisioning Justice?
Well, I think the first thing is that, because we can't be together physically, we are together in a regular series called Rapid Response, and you can tune into that. Our next one's coming up in a month. So if you're on the IllinoisHumanities.org email list, news list, you'll find out about Rapid Response. And that's where we're really back to Quentin's, phrasing, description, centering the voices of people who have the most experience and have been most impacted by the terrible impacts of the carceral system. So artists, poets, performers, and a real framing of the conversation of the moment. So Rapid Response, all of our Illinois Humanities programs are free. And then I think the second thing is to look around where you are at in your community. And if you notice some art, maybe ask who did that and what that represents, because my guess is no matter where you are, that is happening, and seeing it with new eyes and thinking about that idea that it's going to take bold imagination. And if a phrase like defund the police or abolish prisons is the phrase that gets you thinking, what would that take? What would that look like? You are exercising in an act of radical imagination, and we certainly won't get any farther from where we are now unless we can take that leap together, irrespective of what solutions we can collectively come up with. So be brave, be bold, and exercise your imagination. And I really want to thank Nick and Bob and Art for Justice for giving us a chance to be together, and Stephanie for your gentle and skilled facilitation. This is a lot for us to think about and talk about together.
And Nick and Bob, thank you, Gabe. And Nick and Bob, the obvious thing that people can do to get involved is to buy this piece of history and hang it in their homes. But any sort of other closing things from facility or either of you of how we could work together further on all this?
Well, one of the things, like as I'm taking my notes of all the amazing prompts and inspirations that I'm getting from everybody here, is just when I think of the word freedom, you think of this big, expansive, airy, breathy thing. But what I'm coming away with is so much more meaty. It's the idea that freedom is responsibility. And that just takes me right to vote. make sure everybody that you talk to that's in your like aura is doing that. It's vote. If we want it, we've got to do something.
Yes, and we're not free until we all are free. And so, you know, we're going to just keep working hard and being as proactive as we possibly can and just putting it out there in the world. You know, the amazing thing about today is that it's so extraordinarily refreshing to have these conversations that, you know, many people can have access to being a part of. And, you know, that allows us all to sort of reflect and to see ourselves existing in the world differently. So it's been amazing just spending this hour, 20 minutes or what have you, just in conversation with Quentin and Gabriel.
Time with the work. Yeah, and spending time with the work in a way that I don't think we all see it, but it's one thing to see and it's one thing to talk. And so to just have this conversation, I think is, you know, a privilege that we wouldn't have been able to do had it not been for convening. So thank you to all of you. The concept of making this program free also was incredibly important to us. So just to end on my remarks, so exhibition weekend will have many programs hosted on this microsite throughout the duration of the weekend. So it officially launches tomorrow, September 25th until the 27th. But all of these panels are being recorded and can be watched live and free from the internet, from everyone's home. And in addition to that, for this specific conversation, we've partnered with Ocula, which is a leading contemporary art journal based in London and Asia, and they will be transcribing this talk and publishing it as part of their conversations series. So it will have much more legs than even what we're discussing now. So there'll be so many ways that Gabe and Quentin, you can share with your networks and everyone that really needs to be hearing and thinking about these issues right now. So sincerely thank you all for taking the time, and it feels informal to say goodbye over the internet, but we'll see each other again soon. And until then, this was really wonderful, and thank you.
Thank you.
Thank
Bye-bye.
you.
Stay well, everybody.
Thank you so much.
Bye, all.